you have any guideline there?
Okay. While it's coming up though, while it's coming up, we can look now at the emotional part. Now, while persons are grieving, we know that it's not easy to accept people around us. And sometimes, even our very best friend, we tend to snap at them. And we snap at them because we're not able to deal with our own emotions, right? And so sometimes persons who do not understand would want to feel that we are different. But we are not different. But because of what we are actually going through, that really poses some problems to us. And then we can look also at the spiritual part. Now, sometimes when we are grieving, we don't want to pray. We don't want to go to church. And sometimes when persons come to visit us, we do not participate in that part and that aspect of the visit because our spirit seems to be so low. And when our spirit is low, you can understand that we are not going to be listening to anybody. Satan is, No, I didn't because it's fully charged. I just take it on fully charged.
If you have it on your thing, just go ahead. All right, let's take it. Breathe in and
You need to plug it in. You need to plug it in. Yep. But you got it right.
you have the info on your thing now, Sister
You like the
Banton.
charger?
Just charge it. I just think
Sometimes the
charger now
batteries,
is fully
sometimes the
charged.
batteries might not
I
be
know it's giving problem, but you don't run it so
maintained.
fast.
Sister Banton, you don't have any.
You want to run your fully charger?
Just shut down. Okay.
When it comes up, I can hit it.
You want to go ahead?
Yes, I can go ahead.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon again, brethren. I hope you don't mind me sitting. I'm not as young and vibrant as many of us are. Yes, all right. And Sister Banton had reached a stage where she was talking about stages of grief. So it is not by chance why it stops right there. Because there is where, sometimes things happen and we get flustered and all of that. That's the last sentence I heard her with. All right. Okay. All right. So, stages of grief. Psychologists have tried to put grief in different stages. And there are different things that happen in each stage. But I want to ask you a question, and I'm sure, good to see you. Oh my Lord. All right, I am sure you will agree with me. Did you know that grief is a personal matter? Yes, even though someone tries to grieve for you or with you, your experience is so much different. So nobody should come and say, I know what you are going through. Because sometimes persons say that, but they can never tell your experience. I recall when my father and brother died within the same year, just 1 month apart. And then I was anticipating some of my co-workers to say something else apart from saying what I heard. Because listen what one in particular said. I know Mrs. Brown is very strong, so we don't have to worry about her. At that time, I am telling you, it's like something was digging out inside and there was just a mask on the outside. So I just smiled. And the voice within says, if you ever see what is happening within, because there were two very close friends. The brother passed first, and he was like a father. And then the real father, the biological father, passed within a month's time after that one. So it was really very rough, and I started to wonder, how am I going to manage and all of that? But here I am, God is good. Yes, so we say that grief is a personal experience. The grieving process happens when there, as you have said already, when there's a significant loss of someone or something, or I am going to add an opportunity. Because sometimes we overlook opportunities, miss opportunities, and we are there grieving and not understanding that, sometimes the actions that we are involved in, somebody might be wondering and surprised, why is she behaving like that and all of that? Why is she buying so much clothes? Why is she going all out to ensure that she attend every party and whatever it is? This is a session, brethren. I hope you accept, brethren. Yes, brethren, that we want to see how well we can be there for each other. And every one of us has a part to play in helping others to grow and overcome. And as you come this evening, I am sure many of you might be going through a stage and not even understanding it, because sometimes we ignore what is happening to us, and sometimes we take it that, I know nothing, it's a process, are we going through this, and I am always like this. But if you reflect and examine where you're at, many times you will concur that, yes, I'm going through a stage. When we understand the stages of grief, they assist us in the grieving process. The American Psychiatric Association, that is a recognized body that have various conditions listed on what is termed as axis. And grief is one of those areas that they looked at. And this association said the grieving process is categorized in different stages. Each person's experience is unique. So Sister Jones, your experience is not mine. And Sister Watson, your experience is not mine. I can't call any other name. But, yes, my sister here, it's a good while I haven't seen her. So I have to look carefully to recognize that it was she. So every one of us has a different experience, and we have different ways of coping or managing the grief. All do not experience. We must take note that all of us do not go through all the stages, and we do not follow the progression of the stages as I'm going to be mentioning them. Some of the areas overlapped, some we deal with them individually. So we are looking at two models, the 7 stages of grief model by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was a Swiss-American psychiatrist. She started out with a 5-stage grief. And then as time goes on, she made adjustments and separate 1 or 2 sections. So she came up with the 7-stage model. And we also have the 9 stages of grief model. And we will see that with the 7 and the 9, there are overlap. You can find areas that are similar. So I am going to quickly look at the 7 stages of grief. You will see if you fall in any of these stages. But it is said, and as I've said before, it doesn't say, it is not out in stone or concrete to say you have to pass through all of these, or these are how they are, you experience them. So the first stage, according to the 7 stages of grief by Dr. Elizabeth, is shock. I am not going to deliberate on the areas because somebody else, my colleague, is going to be doing that part. So shock, you know when you're shocked, you just look different and things not go right. Sometimes there's an absence of focus and all of that. So the eyes open wide. Sometimes no sound coming out of the mouth, just the action. Yes, right, all right, good. Then we have denial stage. No, sir. I just left her down there, sir. Or left him down there, sir. Or it couldn't be my mother. Then we go to the stage of anger. Something is happening. What a thing. So, I can't talk to anybody. I prefer not to talk to anybody now. So there you have pent-up anger, pent-up emotions. And you would prefer not to talk to anybody. Sometimes you even get mad and say, God, you couldn't do this to me. 2 one time. I don't even get over the first one. And it's 2 very close persons. So sometimes we get angry. Then Sister Banton touched on the bargaining part. That's also another stage. Then we move on to depression. Things not going right, sadness, and all of that. But as time goes on, we realize that we reach a stage where we say, you know what? Whatever it is, whether Jonah swallowed the whale or the whale swallowed Jonah, some swallowing guts to go on. I have to pick up myself. I saw it go. It's inevitable. I can't bring back the persons. So this stage, you look at it as the acceptance and the stage of hope. So those 2 are combined. And many of the therapists, they put those 2 as one stage. Then we look at the processing of grief. So that is the 7 stages model. Then we are going to go, I'm not sure, Sister Banton. Okay. I'm moving on now to the 9 stages of grief. 6th and 7th, acceptance and hope. Those 2 merge. And then the 7th is processing grief. Yes. So we are moving on now to the 9 stages of grief. And as I've said before, the 9 stages have an overlap, right? So we have shock and denial. as the first stage here. What is happening? This can't be true. Then the second stage here is termed as disorder. Things not functioning right in the brain. Disorientation sometimes take place. My colleague will elaborate on that. Then the third stage is anger. You notice that is also in the 7 stages. Why me? Then the fourth stage, guilt and bargaining. The fifth stage is distress. Then we have depression set in. And as we know, there are different stages of depression. Then you have loneliness. That's the 7th stage. Why are they gone and left me here? How am I going to manage? And just with your permission, when I was very young, going to all-age school, yes, because it was all-age school in those times, my home ec teacher, she normally tells us how she was grateful for her mother, because her mother, even though she was married, she lived with her mother. There was that close bond. So she hardly did anything, even though she could do almost everything. She was so dependent on her mother. But when her mother passed, it's like she was helpless, could not manage. And she used that opportunity to encourage us that even though we have persons who are assisting us or persons on whom we depend, we are to ensure that we do what we can to help ourselves. Because she says, like she was lost, like a fish without water. And even though she came and taught us how to prepare meals and all of those things, she said when her mother passed, it's like she could hardly prepare. It's like she didn't know how to prepare a meal for her husband and children. Yes. So this is a stage. She felt so lonely. She felt as though she could not survive. But eventually she survived. So the 8th stage is withdrawal. Withdrawn. Persons are withdrawn. And the 9th stage is acceptance. So that, in a nutshell, is the 7 and 9 stage models of grief. You want me to continue? Okay. Pardon? Of the 9th stage? The pride. Good. And it's very good that you are listening and helping each other. And that's what grief is all about. No one person can go through it. All right, so we are going to look briefly at implications. Yes, sometimes the grief prolongs, and it is important that we be alert and see what is happening to us, know what is happening to us, and be realistic. It is not easy, and I'm not telling you that it's an easy thing. Because when you are disoriented and everything, all the emotions permeate in your being, and it's as though you are not here, you don't know your head from your foot or tail. We say foot, yes. All sorts of things happening. So there are implications of prolonged grief. But I want to look briefly at what is prolonged grief. Prolonged grief is classified as one of the disorders. and it was added to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health. It is the newest edition of the DSM-5, released in just 2022. When I was doing my studies years ago, there were some of these areas that they were contemplating on adding to the DSM. But I don't know what it was. Seemed as if there was some level of uncertainty. And you know, you have to have the various groups or associations coming together with a decision. So in 2022, prolonged grief was termed as prolonged grief disorder, and it was added to the access. Prolonged grief disorder, then, as the International Classification of Diseases described it, it is a persistence and pervasive longing for or preoccupied with the deceased that lasts for at least 6 months. So it can extend beyond 6 months. But if you find yourself, let me use the term stuck, or grieving extensively for this person or the thing, that means you need to take a stock and check for some help. Yes, there are some criteria that you can use to determine if you are experiencing prolonged grief. If there are at least 3 to 8 symptoms of identity disturbance, you know that, you are going through this stage or this phase, or you are experiencing prolonged grief. A loss of your sense of self. I don't feel like myself. You're not reasoning. The reasoning is not straight as normal. And sometimes you become forgetful and all of that. There might be disbelief, avoidance. You experience emotional pain. And sometimes you find yourself going to the doctor with all the medication. You're not helping because it's emotional pain, and the grief is prolonged. Difficulties moving on from where you're at. Numbness, a sense that life is not worth the while. And as we go on, you will realize what can happen when you think that life is not worth the while living. Yes, correct. We continue. The American Psychiatric Association said that prolonged grief disorder manifests itself in anxiety and sometimes result in post-traumatic stress disorder. So one thing breeds another or result in another, from one extreme to the other. So there is also significant sleep disturbances, increased risk of physical illness, which can result in heart attack or heart diseases. It can also result in cancer, high blood pressure, chest pain. So sometimes when we have prolonged chest pain or nagging chest pain, we need to reflect and check if I am really grieving because of whatever loss. long-term difficulty with daily living. It's like you're not coping, you're not managing the level of energy that you had. You find out that you're less energetic and all of that. You find out that your relationship, whether person-to-person relationship is also affected, or intrapersonal relationship is also affected. And many times it results in suicidal thoughts. And you know, sometimes if help is not administered, the end result is suicide. Prolonged grief disorder also affect, listen to this one, your intestinal function. So sometimes you find out that you have problem with the small house, whether it's number 1 or number 2. All right? So we have to examine that. It does not, prolonged grief disorder does not only affect adults, but can also affect children. So we have to take care and observe our children. Sometimes we overlook the children and say, you know, they are not affected, but when you interact with them, coming from the classroom, I'm sure my colleague will agree. Sometimes you see them just sit down in the classroom. One vivid one each time I think about the little young man. He would just sit in class and crying, and don't care how you encourage him. It's like a thought said, go and find out what is happening. Because sometimes, because of the difficulty of the work, you think it's the work that is affecting them. When I went and say, come and tell me what is happening, I am here for you. Miss, my mother, I don't know where my mother is, you know, miss. Because I go to bed and leave my mother in the house. And then morning come and I just not see my mother. And my father said my mother run away. And she don't leave no note or nothing. And you understand what I'm saying? There was a grade 2 class. I'm talking about children. Because sometimes we take it for granted. I taught a grade 2 class some years ago. And the children, they were so disoriented. I look up in the sky and I pray, I say, Lord, you have to help me because no technique was working. And I heard the voice said, put down the chalk and communicate with the children. I tried to ignore it, brethren. But then, so I ignored it and trying to reach the children. It was worse. And the voice again. That's why you have to listen. Put down the chalk, I say, and connect with the children. I say, Lord, I start to find all sorts of excuses because in those days, if you don't follow the syllabus and principal or senior teacher comes around, they raise Cain on you. But I had a good reason. I said, whether they come or not, Lord, you have to help me through this. So I put down the chalk. I get to their level. There was a little chair there. I get to their level. I said, come children, we're going to have a talk. Listen to some of the reasons. Miss, me worrying if my father going to reach home. Me afraid if my mother going to reach home. Me afraid if they kill my father in America. Me worry if me going to go home and get food to eat. A grief, they grieve, you know, deep grief. Yes, so after the session, it was a session. And brethren, after the session, I'm telling you, it incorporated intervention. They were assured that teacher is there and understand what is happening. And after that, I tell you, I finished that subject and moved on to another one and another one. That day, was the most I got out of those children and onwards. What I'm saying, our children are special. They are integral in the grieving process, and they pass through stages and sometimes not able to handle it, and we have to be there for them. So this prolonged grief affect their academic performances, can cause hostility. They are agitated towards others because of the loss or because of the area that caused them to be grieving. Many times they lose trust in others. They become fearful, and they are also withdrawn. Many of them are withdrawn. So I have looked at stages of grief, the 7 and 9 stages of grief, implications of prolonged grief, and it is termed as grief disorder. Do I go ahead?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
All right. Let me look now at some intervention, suggested coping skills, because it is imperative that we cope and not die following our loved ones, if it's the loss of a loved one, if it's the absence of a loved one from the home, a broken relationship. I know my colleague has those as causes. So let us look at some of the interventions, or the interventions that can help. Firstly, I'm not going to give them in order. You already know some of them and have been applying many of these that I will be identifying this evening. It is important that we acknowledge that we are grieving. So, grief comes with pain. So we acknowledge the pain. Connect with others as much as possible. Seek face-to-face support from people who care about you. And that is very important. You can't go to somebody, sister dear, who is not your friend. You can't trust the person. You are not acquainted with the person. Try and see how well you can find the persons you can trust. They will understand. They will feel with you. They will empathize with you. Also, along with individual counseling session or face-to-face, one-on-one, there's also what we call group counseling or community group support, and that many times is right in the church. Sometimes it's among family members. Sometimes it's on your street. A neighbor will come over, or neighbors will come over and share with you, talk with you. Sometimes they don't do anything, but just let their presence be felt. Support yourself. So there are what we call individual intervention and external intervention. All right? So support yourself. That is one of the internal intervention or individual intervention. Support yourself emotionally. And in this way, sometimes you cry. You find a place where you cry. You sigh. Whatever helps to ease the pain. There are times also when the emotional aspect is catered for. It helps with the physical area. So in order to be emotional stable, your physical care is important. As Sister Banton was alluding, you have to ensure that you eat, and not just eat anything. Eat right, or a balanced meal, so that you can balance yourself, get the energy that you need emotionally, physically, socially, in order to cope. Express your grief in words and any creative way possible. Creative way means drawing, sewing, singing, and try not to sing songs. Some person said dead songs. No song named Dead Song. But you know, some songs suggest, when I was young and growing up, certain songs I wouldn't sing because it reminds me of a death or a loss of a loved one. Try and find lively songs to cheer you up, to give you the energy to move on. Yes, we talk about creativity. Some persons are good at poetry. Find your niche and see how well you can, focus in that area. Some people paint, some do gardening, some knit it, right, whatever. When one of my colleagues lost her husband some years ago, we saw her almost every morning coming in a new dress or a new piece of garment. And then when we commended her, we said, "You get barrel, man?" She said, "No, I don't get any barrel. It's last night I did this." In quick time, she saw a dress, she saw a skirt, a blouse, and so sometimes the grief brings about some hidden skills or some that were put on the shelf. Find it and use it, utilize it. Practice deep breathing. Keep hydrated. And I've said early on, eat healthy or a balanced meal. Take time out to grieve, or you call it grief time. You cry, you sigh, whatever, and then you brush off yourself. Us as psychologists or guidance counselors and whatever it is, when you go to some cases, my God, you're crying inside, but you were taught not to cry before the client. So sometimes you have to say, "Please excuse me a little. You're going to shower down your set of crying, and whatever it is, and you get back." All right? So take time out to cry. Set realistic goals and make effort to do. I put "do" in capital letter. Some movement daily. You have to do something. If you don't get to do it daily, by the end of the week, there should be some progress. But if you find yourself stuck at one stage, doing one action over and over, it means that you need some help. Be active. Be purposeful. Resolve that, look here, yes, this is it, but I have to move on. Somebody would say, you got to make an effort to move on. You can also do what is called journal writing or diary entries. Ensure you are getting adequate sleep. In the initial stage, it's challenging to sleep. But you must get restful sleep. That is important. Accept that grief can trigger various unexpected emotions. So, I might be talking to Sister Banton, and she said something, and I just snap. And then she said, but that is not Sister Brown. What happened? But if she's aware, she's going to say, no, sir, something must be happening. What is happening? So you as the individual must be understandable. Understand yourself and know that there are times when you might snap, but there is something that you have to do, control, self-control. And nothing is wrong in saying, I'm sorry that I snap at you, but so and so. All right? Take personal time out to reflect. So personal time of reflection plays a crucial role. Look at good times you had together and see how well those can assist you in the healing process. It is crucial also for you to take time out to pray. Most of us here and those who are online, maybe some of us might be saying, I can't pray when I'm grieving, but it is essential to pray. Even if you are mad or angry with your Creator or with the one who allows the loss, it is essential that you take time out. Also, for many of us, a verse from a sacred book or the Bible, which is also a sacred book, the sacred book, yes, a verse comes to us, I will never leave you nor forsake you, I am with you always, be comforted, words that will help to cheer you up and help you to cope coming down. Your mental well-being is very important, because if you are not mentally stable, you are not going to be able to handle or to cope with the grief. Therefore, every one of us need to ensure that we learn how to build coping skills as quickly as possible so that we will survive. Be patient with yourself, because self is precious. There is only one self, and grief is inevitable. So do well. I hope what was shared will assist you in some way. I know you have been applying these areas already, many of you, but I hope something that was shared here will strengthen and encourage you to help yourself and even help others. Thank you very much. You want to mention? You want to? Okay. All right. Some suggested areas where we can get help. We have the churches, as was mentioned, and it doesn't have to be your church. For some of the areas of grief, sometimes persons would prefer if they don't, if they go somewhere else, seek help somewhere else. So it is left up to you how comfortable you are with your church family. So the church is around, wherever you can contact. I am sure you have churches nearby here, but you also have churches outside of your immediate community. There are what we call community persons, private practices. We have also the Ministry of Health and Wellness. They also provide assistance in these areas. And I have a number for some of the resource centers. I have for the Ministry of Health, it says 876 New Life. That is 876-639-5433. We also have Choose Life. They deal with various areas of grief. And if it happens, God forbid, that there's a suicide, you can also receive help there. They specialize in this area. 876 920 7924. And you have like the Michael University College, they also offer counseling in those areas. There are some others. These are the ones I had written. There are some others on the slide, but we're having some challenges. But I think you have gotten some. And as we have said, there are individual and private practices. And you might have known of areas where you can suggest to the brethren so that, and you might have persons among yourselves. All right? Thank you very much. God bless. Oh, sorry, just one other thing. Brethren, closure plays a significant role in how you deal with grief. Sister Banton mentioned so many situations around us, and sometimes some of us take on the cases that we hear of, and especially when there is no closure. You heard of loved ones being killed or missing and whatever. Recent ones, I'm not going to even mention them. But those family members, when they don't see anything to say, yes, that is my child or my relative, and the actual burial or cremation, whatever it is, assists in the healing process. It helps with closure. So I'm saying that closure helps with the healing process. And it is important, whenever we can, to look at that also. Thank you very much.
Brother, I just want to say how sorry I am that the laptop really went like that. I don't know why. Because, yes, and I want to thank my colleague here because she has covered very well the areas that we had planned to deal with. And so I think at this time we'll take some questions. Or if there's any person who want to share an experience you would have had that you want to share, at this time we'll ask that you do so.
There, last Monday, 25th, was the second anniversary of my mom's passing. And when I heard about her passing, I was at work. When I went back to that spot last month, I started crying because I was having flashback.
Yeah.
And someone said to me, "Why are you going back there?" You know, that hurts because, as you were explaining a while ago, that no one knows what is taking place within you. So for someone to look at me and see me crying and asking me why I'm crying, and I say why I'm crying, and you're going to say to me, why am I going back there? You know, it doesn't encourage me, or it doesn't give me any, what should I say? I don't know what to explain, but it doesn't give me anything to say.
Comfort.
You care, or you're comforting me,
Yeah.
or anything. And I just want to know, how do you deal with that? Because I felt so upset that day and maybe the following morning too, that I really didn't want to go anywhere near that person was. So I just want to know what kind of state, because you see, when you lost a loved one, it there are certain dates that stand out in your mind. The date when the person died, the birth date of the person, which my mother's birthday was Sunday gone, the date when you actually lay the person to rest, when those dates come back, you're going to have flashbacks. But for Sunday gone, I think I dealt with it good. I was in church and I was quite fine. But there are other times when you're alone, as you mentioned, loneliness, and you start remembering everything. And as you said, you cry and you brush off yourself. So that's what I am trying to do now. But I was told that grief, you have to give it time. It can't just go away immediately. So I am asking that question, is it so? Is it that you have to give it time? Because I was thinking that maybe the second year I would be fine. But it doesn't work at all. I was crying the 25th as if my mother just died. It took a toll on me that entire day. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to do anything. As you said, your energy level just go down. Things was just not, no.
Point out, and I am in agreement. When I was doing the research in this specific area, it says that grief never ends. It is always existing. But then when I look at it, I said that is a complete statement. But then it came back to my thought. Grief ends if your mind, if you are not remembered. Some diseases affect your brain and so on. So if you had that experience and your brain is functioning okay, you are going to show some response. Some people might cry, some might resort to one of the areas, a skill, some might sing, some might pray, whatever it is. Some might even start do some crazy dance. You understand? Some persons who are right. So it's natural. And listen what happens now. You as an individual have to resolve that me not paying a person any mind, you know. Sometimes you have to take some stance. Me no business what she want to say. When I was crying for my father and my brother, some person said, I understand because I told one time. Some say, even though I told one time, you still a cry? I said, that a for your business. You know how my father and brother were close to me when I am up here. So I start give them examples. They are living in Westmoreland. I am living up here. And if I am sick up here, I don't send to tell them. We were very close. As a family, we are close. And sometimes when I wasn't feeling too bad, I go out to church. And listen what happened. I can't forget these two occasions. When I was in service worshiping, somebody came and said, Sister Brown, a young man is outside to him drive a car. I said, what him look like? When they gave me the description, I said, that sound like my brother. That time he was alive. I'm just telling you now of some of the memories. Him just come and said, me down a yard, you know, and you come to my mind. And me just say, me hire one car, because my car is down, and come look for you. Hire car. Me never send go tell him. I was sick for a week. And then is the Sunday I went out to church was not 100%. So it's after everything I said, say, that was discerning. Him discern or him pick up. Said something wasn't going right. One of the other occasions that early morning in the 5 o'clock, we did not get up as yet. And I just hear a knocking on the gate outside. And when I said, who is that? I heard, Ami man, he called his name. Ami man. He said, why you come so early? What happened? You carry a trip? He said, no. Are you people me come look for? Me can't be at ease. Me don't know what is happening. And that was him. You understand? So me never business who wants say me pining over him or whatever it is. After a while, I come to realize. And you see what happens there now, those instances were triggers. We call them triggers. The anniversaries, birthdays, special functions. Yes, right. Those events, they are triggers. So if you are not careful, or sometimes don't care how you try to be careful, they trigger some form of emotion. Because the emotions, you know that they play an integral part in grief or in the loss of a loved one. So don't try and see how you can ignore or don't pay them any mind, because you is you and as you know what you're going through. And you are not at that stage today. So that means you are not stuck. And it's not that type of prolonged grief disorder happening to you. Right. Okay.
Just to add on what my colleague have just said, I have here it says that yes, there are different stages of grief to go through, but could be a little misleading, as it makes grief sound like it's a step-by-step process. And once you navigate one stage smoothly, you should move into the other stage. It's not so. And another thing we need to do, we need to understand that persons are different, and because persons are different, we cannot treat everybody the same way. And I would encourage persons, if you go to visit somebody that is grieving, if you are not sure what to say, keep quiet. Sometimes the best way to do is to keep quiet. Or maybe to a hug or a squeeze or something like that. But sometimes we need to keep them out a little zip, because sometimes it really sends persons to a place where you not have want to see them, Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
It's on.
When we visit someone who is grieving, as Sister Banton says, listen. Because sometimes what we think is hurting the person, that's not really the depth of what is hurting them at that specific time. I remember a lady lost her son, and we thought she was really down because she lost her son. But when we tried to find out how she was, what she needed, how she was feeling, she was really grieving because she didn't know how she was going to bury him.
Yes, right, the cost.
So the pain at that time was not for the loss of the son, but what am I going to do? So it is so important that when persons are in any given situation, whether it's a death or a loss of property, a loss of job, anything, we really find out exactly how they are thinking before we make our comments. I won't take up any more time. Another time I'll talk about my loss.
Okay.
Is there a period, a time frame that to say that this person that you'd use to indicate if this person is suffering from prolonged grief?
Yes, there are some things that triggers. We call them triggers, and there are some signs that you look at. And I think my sister here dealt with some of the signs. And some of the signs that we must look at is that persons are not keeping normal routine, right?
But
They're
after
withdrawn.
how long? Say, for example, somebody has lost. So if somebody has lost a loved one, so after what time frame you say this person should be
Moving on.
functional?
Well,
And I put
as
functional
I
in quotation.
said earlier on, the DSM-4, now DSM-5, has indicated 6 months. And there are some criteria that are set in the DSM-5 that will tell you, when you look at these criteria and you see them occurring over and over, then it means that it's time that you seek intervention because you're not moving from the stage that you're at.
So the intervention.
Sorry. So your grief, you don't have a set time. I think both of us has said it some time ago. There's not a set time, sis. I might take a month. Sis might take
5 months.
years, yes, sometimes years. But because they are always reawakening of the situation. So it is not that intense, but it is ongoing.
So along with psychotherapy is is there a medical aspect to it if somebody is grieving that they should seek medical attention or so?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
there's an aspect to it. Especially if persons are complaining for too much pain and depression.
Yes.
Because we have what we call somatic pains. And when persons are feeling that kind of pain, then person must get intervention.
And it's the medical. That
And it's a
is
medical
through the
intervention,
medical
through a doctor,
intervention.
you know.
Yes. So when you go, many times the medical doctors, they will talk with you and have an idea what is happening. They will also make referral if they cannot help with the medication. They will make referral to psychiatrists and so on. Am I right, sis? Right.
Any other question or sharing? Okay.
Can one genuinely take on someone else's grief and hold that person step out of that experience?
Well, it's not difficult to take on somebody else's grief. And it is also not difficult to step out. It depends on how much empathy and how close the relationship, the bond that you share with the person. So you can take it on and then you throw it off when you're ready. For some persons, though, it is difficult to throw off the grief. And so even when a person who actually started grieving gets out of that realm, the other person is still going on. The other person is still going on. And it means now, sometimes I hear they say you pay persons to grieve because you wonder why that person is grieving. And actually, the loss is not belonging to that person. Sometimes persons are grieving. Okay, I'm saying that sometimes person take on grief and it doesn't belong to them. But because of the bond that they share with the person who are actually grieving, now after a while it become a part of them. And so if the person that was grieving would have to say to them, it's time now you stop because I am through it. So why are you prolonging that? It's a common phenomenon. And we have persons who are paid to grieve. And because they are paid to grieve, they become a griever.
Yeah.
They're always grieving for persons, even when nothing happens in their real life.
Really want to help someone, is it advisable to take on their grief? Is that advisable?
As a counselor,
I just wonder, isn't it better for you to keep a distance in order to be able to help the person properly?
As a counselor, Sister Fuller, it is not in your interest or healthy or health-wise for you to take on person's grief. Because as a counselor, one thing you must know, when you finish counseling, you must leave it there. You should not take it home or anywhere with you, because once you start that, then you're going to be burnt out. And then you're going to compromise the person's ability to overcome that. So there are many dangers in that, and that is why a person that is a counselor must also be counseled. If you are a counselor, you must have a counselor, you know, because there are times you will slip down the road, and that can be devastating. Okay. That's what I was going to do. At this time, we are going to be asking if there's anybody online who would want to ask a question or to share. It is your time now. Nobody?
You want to ask again? You want to ask again?
We're waiting first.
Oh.
Is there anybody online? No. Any other question or observation?
He lost his wife over 10 years now, and he's sleeping on the floor, and he will not let go of her clothes. I feel that he's sick, and he's a physiotherapist. But he will not sleep on the bed where they were sleeping together, and her mother cannot get him to give over her clothes to the family. I don't know what is going on. He's at his job, but something is wrong, and I think at this stage, he may need some professional counseling.
I think so. Because for such a long time, the
Yes,
person
it's
should be
over
able to
10
sleep in the
years.
bed.
Yeah.
And for the clothes, if the clothes is going to keep you down or keep you in a state of grief, you should get rid of them. And so maybe that's what you could say to that person, if you're close to the person. Or ask the person to get help professionally.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
My question is, grief may not be of the same dimension for everyone. And I find that a set of siblings, once almost every sibling has passed and one is left, the grief that is felt by that one seems to be more complex than the other. And it leaves them in a state where even my mother now, I'm not sure how to handle that. Of 9 siblings, she's the last. And she's not the oldest. And that is, my concern, because I've seen a shift from within a year and a half of active and moving around to almost complete shutdown. So I'm wondering, in that stage, are those stages still applicable for that intense level of grief? And how do you respond to a situation like that?
If I may respond to your Rev, we have what we call cumulative grief. Now, this grief is the one that occurs over time. You're having one this year, one next year, one next week, one the other week. Like in my case, for example, what you'll find is that if you're not careful, and if there's not somebody around you that understands the lifespan and know the stages that you pass through and what is to expected or what is expected of you, you're going to find that your cognitive going down, your physical will be going down, your social, your emotional, all of them will be going down the road. And so whenever there's a last sibling, that person, you can expect that person to go down just like that. And you see them good today and tomorrow they died. Because they're always grieving, and the grief is intense and accumulative.
Yes. Yeah. May I just say something, Rev? I can relate to that situation because my mother was the last sibling. So what we do, or I normally speak up in these situations. So when it was the second to last one, we had a talk, and we said, I just say, Mommy, it's just you and uncle. One uncle you have left. So we build up that conversation. And we said, Mommy, we don't know whether it's you or uncle going to go before. What if it's you? Or what if it's uncle? And when I reached the uncle part, she said, then only me going to be left. So when it so happened that uncle went before her. So I said, Mommy, you realize what happens now? She said, yes, missus, and me next. Me say, yes, man, is you next. But, you know, you build up her hope when they know the Lord too. It is not saying that it is going to, right, it is going to take the place of the grief, but at least they are able to be prepared. Many times the mind, the cognitive area is not at the place. So when you lose a loved one, you know, and when you really think about death, don't care how you think you are there and ready. It's a reality, and it's a phase, but many times we are not really prepared for that phase. So I would suggest also, as Sister Banton, with what she has said, it's a reality that she will go down with certain activities and all of that. But whatever you can do as whether children or other family members, maybe older than you are, you know, can give support. Sometimes have some little time out and just have talks so that, you know, it can help to build her. And if there are things that she used to love to do with her siblings and so on, whatever activity can assist in those areas. Yes.
Okay, any other question, any other observation? Okay. I think we're done here then. Yeah. Anybody's online now that would want to ask a question? Or no? Okay.
We have a number of persons online, but we are not seeing anybody interested in asking a question.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, hand over to the moderator.
Somebody's online.
Somebody online? Okay.
Ask them to unmute.
Thank you so much. One of the challenges that I face is that for grieving for me, once the funeral is over, for example, and everybody goes their separate ways, usually after a week or two, you feel so lonely because it's as if nothing has happened for the majority of persons, but for you who at home and the house is empty or the person is not there anymore, it is so hard. So I appreciate the seminar in terms of talking about the stages of grieving. So even though you kind of know that everybody have their business to go about and so on, sometimes I wish there was a little bit more support after the funeral for those of us who are grieving. Because since we know, it could take 6 months or whatever, or a longer time for us to come to fully grips with the situation, sometimes we have to be mindful that the funeral is not the end of our grieving. and we still need the support.
Yes, that's true.
That sounds like Sister Ingrid.
Yes.
That's true.
As Sister Ingrid mentioned, I just want to share one experience I had. When my father was sick, I was happy that I was not living at home. Because my father was my best friend. And my mother close up, but my father, if I would go outside, if I went out and meet a guy, my father would hear first before my mother. And when my father was sick near death, I prayed, I said, God, don't let me have to stay there, you know? And I was not thinking of the pain. Well, I was thinking of the pain that the person who were living there would be experiencing. And that was why I was saying to myself, I'm glad that I was living out. So as Sister Ingrid puts it sometimes, it's because we want to shelve ourselves from the pain, so we tend not to go back. You know? So that again, it takes understanding, right? And it takes a level of caring, you know? Okay.
What I'm looking at too, if there is any way that this is an area that we really all have to look at. And if there's any way that we can make some arrangements for someone or persons to be there for the one who is left, because yes, it's really, really, really heartrending when you alone is left there. So if there's any possibility as a church, this is something that, you know, we can look at in case somebody, I know this person passed, and what they did was to arrange that a family member or a neighbor, the neighbor volunteered to come over and stay for, you know, for a month, sleep in the house and so on. In one case, the neighbor was actually sleeping in the room with the person. 2 different beds, but being there, you know.
An observation I would want to make in this case, that we do not wait until we have reached an advanced stage to start making preparation for someone to stay with us, because once we have reached a stage where the dementia or memory begins to fade, trusting people becomes difficult, and it's hard to start a new relationship with somebody at that time. So whatever we can from now, begin to figure out 1 or 2 persons we would want to be around us in our time when we are going into that particular stage.
Yes. And just one other thing to Pastor. As much, those of us who are here, whether physically or online, it is very important that we start looking at ourselves, because we too are going to be like the only one, as Pastor mentioned, sibling who is left, or an empty house and all of that. And one of the things is that sometimes I found that when I was young and all of that, my father built a big house and tried to facilitate all of us, saying 1 room for this one, that one, that one. And after a while, he was the first one to go from the house. And after a while, the house was just there without anybody. So even like now, when I go down and see the house, when I reach the gate, is I water start coming down, because memories come back. But what happens, that house is now gone, and another one is there. So it's like I'm lost. Where is the room that I used to sleep in? You know, those things. But then I have to acknowledge the reality. It is no longer there. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. We had a good afternoon, so sorry that we started late.
So that my laptop went down.
But we do all things in Christ.
Yes.
Learn something. Because I am sure that when I leave here this evening, I am going to be working on my personal self. So that I don't reach certain stage in my grieving, right? And I just pray that we will all look at that. At this time, I'm going to call on Deacon Watson, come to do the vote of thanks and presentation to presenters and the moderator.
All right, I just want to express heartfelt thanks to Mrs. Banton, Sister Banton, and Mrs. Brown, my one-time colleague, for taking time out to share on such an important topic. Something which I used to when I was younger take for granted, but I have found out, especially since COVID, and you have so many people dying, and I'm now seeing, and then I'm getting up in age, so more people dying around you. And I'm now seeing the impact of grief on people. I'm realizing that people need to be educated about grief. Yes, they really need it. So we know that people are very busy nowadays, so it must have been a sacrifice to be here. But not only that, I do presentations as well, and I know it takes a lot of work to prepare. So I know it's a sacrifice. So we really want to thank you for helping us to understand a little more about the whole grieving process. And what I found this evening, that it was a very relaxing and simple session. Not that the thing is simple, this. But it's, it's so relaxing, but quite informative. So we really appreciate it because we can know what I would say. For example, as we say, if somebody is grieving, well, I always keep my mouth closed because I'm a person, I'm not very good at knowing what to say to you. So most time I prefer to keep my mouth closed. Not that I'm not, supportive of what you are going through, but I prefer not to say anything because I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I'm learning that nothing is wrong. With that, your presence is more important. So at this time, we want to show our thanks in a very tangible way. So I'm going to invite Mrs. Brown to come forward. I can present you with a little token. All right? So on behalf of the Ebony Vale Baptist Church, we just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And you're free to come again. Okay? Thanks much. Thank you all. Oh, yes, I can do. You sit there, right?
No, man, it's
Okay. Let me do Sister Banton so you can take your time to help me. So, Sister Banton, you will have a reminder of this session that you have done every time you look. And I know that you love plants. So we are presenting this token to you just to show our appreciation for your effort and for just coming out to support our program at this church. Thank you very much. Now the moderator, Sister Eva, could you assist here as we want to show our appreciation here? So Sister Kay Beckford, we want to thank you for agreeing to moderate the program. And I must say, I notice nowadays you are very willing yes, to lead in this capacity, and you are growing in this area. So this will remind you of your growth every time you look at it. Thank you again, my sister. Thank you. All right. Finish here. I'm finished. So you can come back. Don't bother me because you get the plan.
I must say that maybe because of my grieving, maybe that's why I was a little unwilling. So I think I am growing and I'm getting out of the grieving stage. All right, so at this time I'm going to call on Pastor to come and pray and do the benediction.
Just before I pray, I just want to affirm the words of thanks and appreciation that was extended to our presenters. I also thought of a question after. You don't have to answer, but with the disruption in our normal funeral procedures during COVID, which would help the grieving process along, where loved ones were buried without the normal process. No doubt grief would have been, how grief is processed would have been affected significantly. When you could not have the church service, you could not go to and get a closure, which was spoken about. These are serious implications that exist. And we are in a process where we have to monitor ourselves, that we don't become insensitive to death or people's mourning, because it is now so regular and so prolific that we don't just say, sure, it's just another person dying, and we don't pay the attention that we did. Just one other comment. Somebody mentioned to me that about 10, 15 years ago, when someone died and the hearse passing through a community, everything would be closed. Businesses and so forth. Nowadays, it's like nothing.
Festive.
And you wonder if we, as a nation, are becoming a little bit too casual where death is concerned. And whether or not it is saying something about our psychological frame of mind in terms of death. But as we process all of these things, we thank God for the discussion to open up on grieving. But let's not leave it here. Let's take it a little bit further in seeing how we can organize ourselves. Sister Ingrid made a beautiful point that I think as a church we can capitalize on. After the funeral, let's pay more attention to facilitating healing, but also look at the remembrance services in a new light that we would normally have. Let us stand as we... Yes. Lord, we thank you for the ways in which you are reminding us that you are present with us. And we who are mourning, God, sometimes we lose sight of those things that are critical, sensitive, and are of serious impact and implications for our lives. We pray, God, that as we reflect this evening, that the takeaway that we would receive for continued reflection is that you are always in our midst, and you are always processing with us our grief. Lord, we thank you for Sister Banton and Sister Brown, their time of preparation and their delivery to us, helping us to understand our own struggles and our own processes. And that sometimes we're not even mindful that the behaviors that are emanating from us are as a result of grief. That the excessive shopping or excessive close off that we experience, the emotional and mental and even communal lockdowns that we experience is as a result of the process of grief. Lord, we pray that as you walk with us, take full control of our mood and our mode of living, so that we will honor you even when we are in pain. We will rely on you even when we are at a place of distress. So Lord, as we thank you and celebrate you, may your blessing rest upon us as we leave this meeting to our varying abode, and that you will journey with us and comfort us. And Lord, even as you have allowed us to learn, cause us to teach others, to share with others, to impact others. So Lord, may your blessing rest upon us, God the Father. May your blessing rest upon us, God the Son. May your blessing rest upon us, God the Holy Spirit, forever three in one, now and evermore. Amen and amen. God bless you all. Thank you for sharing. Those online, thank you for participating and being a part of this session. So sorry we didn't have more of you face to face, but blessings to you all. Okay, I'm told that we have refreshment only for those who are face to face. We're sorry those online, you're excluded from this section, but God bless you and have a blessed day.